Welcome to another episode of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast, brought to you by FlowPath. I'm your host, Griffin Hamilton. This is the show where I interview industry experts who share their stories, strategies, and insights into modern-day facilities management. From hospitality to commercial real estate and everything in between, we'll learn what it really takes to succeed as a facilities manager. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast. And today's guest, I've had the pleasure of knowing for, 2 or 3 years now, but Joe Sharp with Meadowbrook Facility Solutions. Joe, how have you been?
Oh, great. I appreciate you making time and having me on.
Absolutely, and I am so excited to say Meadowbrook Facility Solutions, and we'll dive into that here in a second. And for those watching, seeing that fancy logo on your shirt there, but Joe and I, just for the audience, we go back here a couple of years, and he is one of two people that I have worked with, had the pleasure of working with at both of the businesses that I've been a part of starting. First one being Grease Bandit here in Atlanta, servicing restaurants, and he was one of my customers there, one of my favorites, and certainly held me accountable, held my crews accountable to a level that I certainly respect. And as we launched FlowPath here over the last couple of years, he and Meadowbrook has come on and using FlowPath as a software solution to help monitor and manage the different facilities that they have. But that's enough about our relationship. I'll turn it over to you, and you tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. So I have been with Meadowbrook Brands restaurants, right? So Meadowbrook Restaurants and Meadowbrook Treats are, two wings of the same operation. They operate Zaxby's on the Meadowbrook Restaurant side, and they operate Dairy Queens on the Meadowbrook Treats side. I came on 8 years ago out of the operations role in the furniture world through a very interesting twist and turning story, but brought me here to work with actually a great friend of mine who was the operations manager here, who felt like at 4 restaurants, which is all they had, he needed a facilities guy. He was doing everything, and so he knew me personally. Hey, let's talk this out, and so I came on board experimentally. Very quickly, and again, I'm operations, I'm efficiency, but I don't know anything about the restaurants. So I was really fortunate to plug in with some good FM guys in the Zaxby's corporate side to kind of get me rolling. And I just was looking at the way things were being done, and only knowing what you've been told is the status quo, that's all you have to go with. And I started just seeing deficiencies in that, where I'd go, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I'm talking to other people in the industry, and they're like, no, that's how it goes. It's par for the course. Don't worry about it. And I'm just not okay with that. And so Meadowbrook Brands gave me a lot of flexibility and leeway to say, if you think you have a better way, roll with it. And I learned how to not make a light bulb a lot of ways. I've had certainly some minor and some catastrophic failures, but the grace of the organization saw the growth and said, well, that's okay, let's keep plugging. And we really were able to hone in a prevention system where we ended up, I got EPA certified, I became the technician on the ground, we hired some low-level people to come in entry level and do the facility things that so many people have to farm out, the pressure washing, windows, and all that. So we just said, let's handle everything internally. It seems like the service system isn't built to really benefit or prosper an operator, right? It's a symbiosis. We work together. But, it always felt like there was a disconnect there. So we said, let's build a better system where we don't have to call anyone. And so that's what we did. And we ran for about 3 years doing that, where we were 100% internal, save our hood cleanings that we had to farm out, and other legal things that needed to be done. But as far as equipment repair, we just did it all. When the Dairy Queen door opened for us, Dairy Queen added a whole different layer than we experienced, because Dairy Queen has a lot of high-end specific equipment, right, that need a lot of mechanical attention. And, a $20,000 ice cream machine is going to love you as much as you put into it. And so many operators, as we talked to other, we built a system and said, okay, yeah, we're good. And we started talking to other Dairy Queen operators who didn't have the luxury of an internal system. And externally, there's no fiscal way to truly pour into your equipment the way you need to from manufacturer specifications. And so people just don't. And then they end up spending a lot more on the breakdown side of it. And so we started, kicking ideas around and talking to the manufacturers. I went up to Illinois, got certified in the various ice cream machines to say, okay, we can offer our services outside. And so that's where Meadowbrook Facility Solutions was born. And I've got several EPA certified techs, that we serve inside, right, primarily. And now my guys are doing that, and I have myself focusing on the external customers, which started just as other Zaxby's and Dairy Queen operators, and now it's opened up to other people. So not an infomercial for Meadowbrook Facility Solutions. That's just how it came to be and what happened. But
and I think it's important to provide some context there, because that is a really interesting story, especially in the restaurant space where, margins, as everybody knows, I mean, you're looking at pennies, right? And that is something where short term, having that preventative maintenance plan in place, it could be costly, especially if you're going from nothing to something. But it is really fascinating to hear about you going through that process of building that out, the long-term return that you guys have seen. But I think it's important to call out the trust that leadership had with you to go break things, to figure out like what can we do to tweak how we operate to have that long-term ROI. That is what is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, definitely, and I will sing their praises to the hilt. Their trust and grace with me knew no bounds in the beginning, and as I tried to, it's a beautiful cycle, that I know the people I work for support me no matter what, and no matter what, and they know when they call me with an actual urgent need, I've got them no matter what, and that's really rare in an organization, period. And knowing that beautiful cycle with my operator, that's what I wanted to create with other operators. Because certainly that's, again, it's not the service company norm. We, like you said, and it's just, but the variation between what you can do internally and the fiscals, like you said, there's a very interesting argument to be made at, to play easy numbers. If you have some sort of prevention program that costs you $500 a month, so you're going to spend $6,000, right, this year on prevention. Well, the reality is if you don't spend that and you just respond, are you going to spend more or less? Who knows? That's the decision we have to make as facility managers. Well, why would I invest $6,000? Something still could break down and I could be spending more. And if I don't have anything catastrophic, I'm going to spend less, and now I'm net positive. It's the intangibles that we learned inside, right? So it is 15 degrees today here in North Georgia. There is one air conditioner and unit on the roof of this Dairy Queen I'm sitting in that services the dining room. Throw a belt this morning and you have no heat in this dining room. Now the dining room is 50 degrees. What are we losing in sales today, right? So there are so many intangibles that I sit with operators and really try and pick their brains as we grew this business to say, I want to be a different company. I want to partner with you on how to maximize your investment for a return, instead of saying, well, pay me $100 and I'll come change your belts or I'll come change your filters every month. Is that really benefiting you, or is that maintenance theater? Right. And there's a lot of maintenance theater out here.
I think. Do you find it, as you were talking to operators, do you find it challenging, or do you find it not necessarily an argument, but are you essentially having to pitch the value of preventative maintenance? Is that accepted as easily as you would expect?
So that's about the trust and the previous relationship. I am so blessed that, again, we were built on our local operators. So, there are Dairy Queens and Zaxby's all around the ones we own. And so talking to those operators and having those operators come into our location and see the monitoring systems that we use and see the processes we have in place, and to truly explain to them, the reduction I had in summertime service calls internally. You know, I made clear to all of them. I saw them all summer long. I didn't see my stores because my stores, we really invested on the front side. Is that ROI positive, neutral, or negative, right? I mean, from the non-tangible, you're close, right? I mean, from the non-tangible, you're way off the ROI positive side. To know I never had a catastrophic breakdown. I never had a walk-in cooler that was like, hurry up, it's down. You know, it's not to say I can sell you the ability to never have a breakdown, but part of the facility manager role when I was looking at this was, okay, what, before we took it on internally, and even after, using CMMSs like FlowPath, where we got this beautiful medical chart of a piece of equipment. So we could say, well, what broke down universally across all the stores? Well, these contactors break down, you know, and it seems like I'm constantly responding to this contactor, this capacitor, this very simple, inexpensive mechanical part. So how about we just stock up on those $30 parts and we just replace them every year, whether it needs it or not, Because if we do that, I know I'm not going to have the, hey, the compressor won't come on because of this $30 part, and drop what you're doing. And, you know, so we were able to look at those metrics because I'm a huge data junkie. And so we're just looking at the physical, what broke consistently. And we said, so that's what preventative maintenance needs to be, not changing, you know, yes, we change filters, yes, we change belts, but that's not preventative maintenance any more than your car needs gasoline to operate. If you fill up, is that preventative maintenance? Or that's what the manufacturer says you have to do to keep it running? Manufacturers say, put filters in or it stops running, period. It's not preventative maintenance, that's minimum requirements. But that's the maintenance theater that so many show up on scene to say, I know legitimately you don't have time to go to your roof and change yours, and then you're not going to. Then it's going to break down. Now you're paying me a service call, so that's an easy ROI. Pay me $100 a month, I'll just take care of it for you. It's still breaking down because all those things that are mechanically going to break down are still going to break down.
So how, as an operator, and this isn't necessarily just in the restaurant space, this is generally speaking, how as an operator, how do they go in and evaluate their service provider, or like what type of relationship do they need to have in order to make sure that that is checked off and it isn't that, as you call it, maintenance theater?
And that's a deep squirrel we can go down on this one, because that's really what I learned when I tried to step outside. I stepped outside as a service company and just applied my principles to other people's locations. And what I learned was, when I truly reduce your breakdowns, I don't get service calls. Well, that's a problem if you're a service company. So I don't have, you know, I'm not alleging service companies have some nefarious agenda and they're, you know, they cannot be in line with an operator's best interests. They cannot, period. An operator's best interest is to find that balance of the PM dollar that gives me a return. A service company, if they PM you so well that the store gets a great return, then the service company doesn't have the service calls. And your people will love you, right? You'll be recognized as, well, yeah, my stuff doesn't break down, but okay, that doesn't pay the bills. You know, I have to have revenue coming in, which is generally, you know, through service calls. Yeah, I mean, the trust of my system fortunately did it for me, right? It's not that Joe's great. It's that we were able to learn a system that worked, that I could say to a friend operator, let me show you, and do it for a few months. And he goes, wow, to the point that if you have a service provider that will come to you and say, don't fix this, right? And there's a ton of them out there, right? Don't fix this. Get the data that a good CMMS gets you and say, look, your end of life on this is in X time, or you're X over that end of life. It benefits me for you to pay me $500 to duct tape it back together, and we'll limp it through the winter, and, you know, maybe we'll replace it later. But if they'll come to you and say, don't, it's truly not worth it, I'm not going to fix it. There's a difference between, let me put a scab on it to get you through because you have to make a decision, but it's not going to be an arm and a leg. So to your first question, like how do you go to a provider and get that accountability or that relationship? That's the magic question. That's actually the disconnect that made me say, can we talk about this? Because there's just a huge disconnect between, as an operator, I cuss service companies. This guy's an idiot. He's just changing parts. He shows up, he doesn't know what, right? All the things that we all say. And as a service company, I've looked at operators who want to do the bare minimum and not do anything preventative, who call me when it's an emergency and expect my life to stop and go, well, the guy doesn't want to take care of anything until it's a problem. Like, so I see both sides and go, where do we meld that we need one another, that we can both benefit from each other and the circle spins in a healthy way as opposed to, frustration and just that angst that can be built between the two factions.
Yeah, I think, and that's where a true partnership comes into play, because I've had experiences just personally where, I have been told, hey, don't do this. I mean, we were just talking before we hit the record button, had to take my car to the mechanic, and they were going in and walk through. It's like, we shouldn't be doing this, this, and this. It was like that, they got a customer for life. And that is something where I think the argument could be made on that side of it is, if you do have that relationship and you do have that trust, like, that business is going to grow because of that, and that word of mouth, and you're going to refer them on over. And it's just extremely tough to find. And that's the problem that you are addressing, and bringing in those unique perspectives on both sides of it.
Yeah, I mean, and from the service side, right, I'm frowned on for some of the things, right? It's like, as operators, we said, let's break the system, right? Let's break the system, let's burn it to the ground and build something new. Well, that's not great for the service industry, right? So there's no desire for my model to take off out there. I started because I have, some apprentices we brought in to work for us internally. So they couldn't be with me all the time. So I started shooting videos of my repairs and posting them on YouTube, and had a private channel so they could reference, okay, here's what it is. When I started servicing outside, I didn't stop that. And so that's a pretty unique scenario from a service company to say, here's what I did. There it is. There's me finding the problem, showing you the problem. Not good, they don't need the technical nitty-gritty of all of it, but here's the synopsis of what I did. So I could walk into, and here's where you're blessed if you have this service company, that they could walk into your store and you're not there to do something, and they go, hey, that's going to be a problem. And they can just go and take care of it, and then go to the operator and say, here's the additional bill for that because this was going to be a problem. And instead of the operator going, who approved that? They go, thank you. Because you have the validation. I have, for good or bad, right? I mean, I have the videos of me doing things and misdiagnosing things. Yep, there's where I got it wrong. But, it's important that everybody sees it. And so that's a level of accountability that's not going to rear its head out here in the service world. It's not, right? Just be an operator and hang around a service guy. We don't want you to, much less to video what we're doing and then send it to you. But that's a better kind of service. That's what we said. How do we build that? What does that look like?
Yeah, and that is, I mean, you hit it on the head with accountability. And how do you hold, everyone accountable, right? And it goes both ways. And, I think that is something where if you are providing a clear a window into, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, over time you are going to build that trust. And, that's where that relationship just kind of takes off. I guess as far as your model and just the way your methodology, like how do you think that differs from the industry as a whole? I mean, we talked about a couple of things, but anything that you would maybe as an outsider look at and say, wow, that's radical?
Yeah. So again, I'm a data junkie, right? And so I spent many years using current monitoring systems that suck. Monitoring systems as they are currently, generally speaking, there's always your outlier, but generally speaking, a monitoring system, is a temperature probe in a cooler that says, hey, it's too late. Hey, your walk-in cooler with $14,000 worth of food is at 41 degrees. Hope your service guy can get here in less than 4 hours, so that stuff is all technically trash. How is that helpful, right? So Find a better way. Find a better way. I've actually partnered with a building automation system who did all sorts of remote lockdowns and sensors and interesting things, and I augmented their hardware to where I could monitor the pressures in my critical systems. So your walk-in coolers, your air conditioners. So instead of on my phone, right? That's the thing now, right? The owner can look on his phone and say, yeah, my cooler's 36, I'm doing good. Oh, warning, hey, is the door open? That's what operators are used to because that's par for the course now. Well, if you're monitoring the lifeblood of the Freon system, right? I'm monitoring pressures. When your technician shows up and he puts his gauges and he's looking at it, that's what I have remotely on all of my critical systems. And what that does is it lets me see the moment a problem manifested, not when its symptoms arose. So it's 9:30 in the morning. The walk-in cooler here at this location, let's say the unit on the roof just dies. You know, the fan shuts off this morning and it's done. Well, I mean, the cooler's 35 right now. I bet that alarm, the temperature alarm will go off in 6 hours, right? It's a pretty new building. It's well insulated. That's going to hold its temp for a while. Well, my monitoring system saw the pressures go way up the moment that fan died. And they have a heartbeat. It's very interesting. We gather data for 30 days before we set parameters. And there is a literal heartbeat that, you know, these systems are no different than a physical heart, right? Not to get like technically nerdy, but that's what it's doing. You have valves pushing out and you have valves drawing back. I mean, that's your heart. That's what it's doing. And there is a rhythm that never changes. And so my system notices an anomaly in the status quo and says, hey, problem, and then sends me a message with that saying, your fan is off on the roof. And I have shown up to my locations, fan in hand, and they're like, well, what are you here for? I'm like, to fix your cooler. There's nothing wrong with the cooler. Yeah? Okay. Right? That's the difference. You know, it's seeing the thing that happens, and you also see the degradation in efficiency over the course of years. A heartbeat does slowly change until all of a sudden it's not pumping with the vigor it used to. You're not getting quite the pressures you used to. So instead of going, my AC needed a service call because the filter or the coils are just clogged because they're doing construction across the street and they're just full of dust, my system sees that building before the breakdown. That's the difference. It's harnessing real data instead of, you know, the theater of it all. And it's a lot, right? It's a lot to digest. When I show people the system, it looks really impressive, and it's like, wow, that's like, it can do almost anything. But I mean, also a system that big, you know, when I put a monitoring system into a new building, I joke that it's a giant headache for a while because it was an existing building that I just brought to light all the problems nobody ever knew. And it's like, oh, we're running all the time. Did you know that piece of equipment's failing? Did you know that piece of equipment's failing? But with those metrics, and we do on a cadence of what the owner wants to deal in, a real prevention where we are drawing the electronic numerics of things, right? What's your amp draws, what's your voltages, and I can watch a motor slowly over amp to where, you know, there is one motor on your exhaust kitchen, and when that motor dies, you have to close the restaurant because you can't cook. And so you have one motor, and I have a location that this is exactly how it went. I said, well, you're allowed to pull 7 amps. I've watched it over the last 2 years go from 5.2 to right at 7. And it's not because it's dirty, you know, it's the motor's failing. It's 5 years old, it's out of warranty, you know, kudos to engineers. And do you want to wait until that breaks and lose sales that day? Or do you want me to get a motor and go up there and take care of it on our time, right? And that's what we say internally. If you don't schedule time to take care of it, it's going to demand the time anyway. So I don't like being told what to do, so I'd rather schedule the time than to let my equipment dictate when I have to go where any more than necessary.
Yeah, and you brought up some interesting points in going into I mean, we're talking ROI and the cost, and you mentioned the potential energy consumption because it's not running efficiently or as efficiently as it could be, and that leads to higher energy consumption, which is money going out the door. You mentioned if there is a breakdown, the loss of sales for that day, and those are things that people like. It is hard to put, you know, on a ledger of like, hey, here is what is happening, because those are secondary effects that you hopefully never see, and it's hard to quantify what is not visible, right? And so that, I think, is an important takeaway there, where it's, you have to look at big picture and what are the ramifications of this happening. And a second point that I love that you've made just in general is the power of this data and how technical you are getting. You don't have a portfolio of 500 locations. This still has an impact where you started out, you said, what, 4 locations?
Yeah. Yep.
And you're still seeing the value of that data, and that is something where I think everyone could take back and say, like, okay, I'm not doing what Joe's doing. I don't have 50 locations. That's not the case. This is for everybody to see the power of data and, actually having a strategy in place that is, using data and analytics. And I think that is a really important point to make here.
Yeah, right. I mean, we, as far as operations, we own 8 stores, right? I am, put this logo away, I'm responsible for managing 8 stores. But yeah, even at that, I mean, well, why don't we just have 7? Well, because I don't want to close the doors of one. And I'm only one catastrophic moment away from closing the doors, especially, with the supply chain problem, right? I mean, we lost the compressor in the middle of the summer on an AC unit, and they gave me a 4-month lead time and it's under warranty on a compressor. So I just don't have an air conditioner for 4 months. What are you going to do at that point when, not that, I monitored it and it was a catastrophic. There wasn't and this is, I think, an important point to make, right? I'm not selling that I'll never, I lost the compressor under warranty, shorted to ground, no signal of failure before then. It just went, right? Those things are going to happen. But, that's definitely the outlier in what I've seen over the, really 5 years I've had my monitoring system in place. You can see it coming, and you can get like with that hood motor and say, listen, the Piper's coming for you. And I don't care, again, as a service company, call me Friday night and, great, let's go to the typical. It's not how I operate, but let's go to the typical. Now it's an emergency call. Oh, now I need to open a supply house on Saturday, and that's going to cost you, Mike. That's great. Your catastrophe is my benefit as a service company for sure. But my service company was built to serve us as operators. So it's like, no, I don't want the call. I don't want the service call. There's enough that's going to break without the stupid stuff. Due to that, I say a service company can't ever fully be in line with an operator's best interests, right? Belts, right? We know belts on every air conditioner, they break, they need to be changed, no big deal. Well, I mean, I can put a standard $20 belt on a unit that I know is going to last numerically a year. That's it. Well, I could put a $30 Kevlar belt on there that'll last 5. Okay, so what do I put on all of my buildings, right? Well, I put Kevlar. If I'm a service company who's doing it like everyone else, am I putting that on anyone else's building? Heck no. Why would I do that? Because I just reduced 4 service calls over the course of 5 years, right? If I serve 20 locations, let's just do the math. Like, I could fund my company just on those calls. I don't want them. I don't need them. And the operator needs to prevent them. So it's like, there will be the catastrophics. There is enough real breakdown to fund another service company out here in the industry. But I don't need the low-hanging fruit. It's worth more to me to present that fruit to the owner and say, let's figure out how you never have to deal with this, and let's take this headache off your plate. So you only have to deal with actual, real, important, unforeseen things, as opposed to we knew this was going to break and we all ignored it. So.
Yeah. Well, Joe, this has been great, and I appreciate you once again coming on. And for those that don't know, Joe was on a panel discussion we had a couple years ago at the beginning of the podcast, so you guys could go back and check that out. But again, Joe, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate everything, and I'm going to put your contact info and LinkedIn profile in the show notes here if anyone wants to reach out. But once again, thank you for your time.
Oh, of course, Griffin. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast. Make sure to subscribe for future episodes and follow us on LinkedIn for more facilities management content.